The second one you mentioned, which is shaming men, and I think that's really important because a lot of guys don't even know that they're being shamed sometimes because it's so inclusive and popular American Western culture to like say things to men like grow up, or you're being, I remember one girl vividly said, oh, men are Peter Pan boys, they don't want to grow up, etc.
Yeah.
Or the most famous one is you're having a midlife crisis, right? And you made an entire video on this. Can you break down this whole concept of midlife crisis that we say about men, and you know why it's why guys need to go in with their eyes wide open when they hear that insult?
Yeah, it's really interesting because it doesn't seem to affect everyone equally. You know, clearly not all men have midlife crises, and it seems very clear that more men seem to have midlife crises than women, and that's kind of strange.
Yeah.
I mean, if midlife crises are just about a growing awareness of our own mortality and how little time we may have left, it seems like that should affect women equally than men.
True.
Right?
Yeah.
So I do think that there's some component to that, is that it gets to be about 40 to 50, you might have your first real brush with mortality. Maybe you had your first real illness. Maybe your parents are ill or they've passed on. And you realize, wow, my grandparents are gone. My parents are gone. I'm actually next on the chopping block. Who knows how much time I have left?
Yeah.
And when people, I learned this when I worked with cancer patients for a couple of years, when people actually are facing not just an abstract idea of their own mortality, but a concrete manifestation of the time they have left, they get busy living as quickly as possible. There's this famous psychologist named Irvin Yalom. He said that cancer cures neurosis, which is basically like, as soon as you have a real problem to deal with, all of your fake problems tend to disappear very, very quickly. And neurosis is mistaking a fake problem for a real problem. That's my definition of it. Anyway,
Wow.
Which causes real suffering, by the way. So the reason why I think certain men are subject to the midlife crisis is that it tends to afflict guys who are more rule-following, who are sacrificial, who have stepped up and done the right thing for most of their lives.
Yeah.
And I think they get to this point where they realize, oh, how much time do I have left? And they think, my whole life I've been doing what other people have told me to do. I've done what I should have done. I've been a good boy. You know, I've gone to school and I did what my teacher said. I've gone to work and I've done what my employer said. And then I've served my wife and my children dutifully for sometimes 10, 20 years.
Yeah.
And they think, well,
What about me?
what about me?
Yeah.
When do I get to live my life? When do I get to benefit from the good and the value that I'm generating for all these people around me? I want a cut of my own pie too. And it looks like a midlife crisis because potentially the last time these guys were allowed to think for themselves, to be selfish, was when they were teenagers, before they were more or less forced to assume responsibility, sometimes very early. And so that's why I think a lot of male midlife crises look like teenage fantasies, is because they're kind of out of practice being selfish.
Yeah.
And so it's like fast cars and hot women. Nothing wrong with that, of course. But one of the points that I made is that I think it's useful for guys to ask, what about me, sooner?
Yes.
Earlier in their lives. So it doesn't have to like explode in an orgy of adolescent, let's say, selfishness at 45. I think it's good to be selfish. Like, selfish is baked into the individual organism. It's connected to our survival instincts. I think trying to override our natural predilection for selfishness is probably going to cause more problems than it's going to solve, actually. And I do think that the reason why men tend to have more midlife crises than women do is that women aren't out of practice asking, well, what about me? This is something that they ask throughout their lives.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting. The key here is I call it creative selfishness. And that's kind of what makes the world go round. Like, we're all in it for myself. It's like, Myron, can I just have some money? Would you mind? You have enough money, man. Just give me some money. I want to have some of your money.
Yeah.
Is that going to work?
Probably not.
Probably not, right? Though he could spare it, I'm sure. So I got to be creative. I got to show up and provide something of value to be able to do business and transact with the world, because they're all out for themselves too, and they're going to try to get what they need and want from me. And so creative selfishness is, how can I get what I want by being of value to other people? That's like, how do I fit into the world among everybody, kind of the dog-eat-dog world of everybody all out for themselves?
I think you're right, because in order for you to be selfless, you have to be selfish first. Because how can you appreciate it if you were never the opposite? So I think that's a good point now.
Go ahead, please, and then I'll go after you.
There's also, we can appreciate that the concept of the self continues to evolve. Like Jordan Peterson talks about this, is that on higher and higher levels, you can conceive of the self as encompassing more and more of society. Like in the beginning, selfishness is just you. But then selfishness might be like your family. Like you wouldn't necessarily throw your family on the bus just to save yourself, right?
Yeah.
And so now there's some folks who might be more important or as important than you. And then it might be their community, because what is the good of living in a house if the rest of your community is a war zone and it's unsafe and there's crime everywhere? It's like, that's no way to live. And so then you begin to take and assume kind of a greater conceptualization of self. At the highest levels, what's good for the individual is what is ultimately good for the greatest number of people.
Wow.
We all have to get there together eventually.
That was well said.
Yeah.
We're a long way off, but we all have to get there together.
Add on to that midlife crisis thing, because I've seen women use this a lot, right? And they typically use it for guys that are kind of having some fun because you mentioned something earlier that like a lot of them end up where they're making a lot of sacrifice early on in their life to end up creating like a certain platform for themselves to be able to be successful in their 30s or 40s, etc. A lot of times they have to give up their 20s, and this is what I did, honestly, to be honest.
Sure.
And some girls tell me sometimes, oh, you're going through a midlife crisis, blah blah blah, and in my head I'm like, I don't think it's a midlife crisis. I look at it like more along the lines of I'm finally realizing my worth and I have the ability to do things that I wanted to do that I wasn't able to do before. And it's always interesting because whenever women say, oh, you're going through a midlife crisis, 9 out of 10 times they're saying that, but they were the ones that had fun in their 20s. They were able to do certain things. They were able to experience certain things in life without necessarily having to sacrifice. Whereas the man, you can't experience these things unless you sacrifice. So if you tell an 18-year-old girl, 19-year-old girl, 20-year-old girl, whatever it is, hey, you should settle down and find a guy. They'll look at you like with 3 heads like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to live my life, right? I'm going to do what I want to do. But if a woman asks a guy in his 30s or his 40s, hey, why aren't you going to settle down, blah, blah? No, I'm going to live my life and do what I want to do. And they're looking at him, oh, you're going through a midlife crisis. No, I'm not going through a midlife crisis. I just finally realized what my value is. And it's not, going ahead and committing to women that quite frankly decided to have their fun in their 20s and be whores. While I had to go ahead and sacrifice, I want to go ahead and get a girl when she's at her peak, when I'm at my peak. And I think that's the best way for it to go. But I think when women say the term, because it's typically females that say you're going through a midlife crisis, not really men. If it's men, it's loser guys that are more beta.
And it's not out of concern. Like a crisis sounds like a bad thing. Like, are you okay?
Yeah.
It's definitely a pejorative term. It's like
100% it is.
It's not actually concerned about the person's mental health.
It's a term to use. It's a pejorative term to shame them into growing up. Peter Pan syndrome. I remember one girl said, a lot of guys have Peter Pan syndrome, blah, blah, blah. Oh, well, how old are you again? Oh, I'm 29. Oh, yeah, now you want to go ahead and say that guys have Peter Pan syndrome. You weren't calling people Peter Pan syndrome when you're 19 or 20. You were having sex with those guys, and you were happy that they were willing to take you in their Ferrari and show you around and everything. You loved the Peter Pans when you were at your peak, but now as you're getting older and you're trying to get some stability, now they're Peter Pans. Now they're commitment phobes. Now they're having midlife crises. Now they're immature. Now they're fuckboys, right? But when the women are at their peak, none of this vocabulary is used when they're at their peak.
And typically, when you hear midlife crisis, you hear a guy that's around 40 plus at Hooters or Twin Peaks with a Corvette that's just drinking beer, watching the sports, hitting on the girls that work there. That's what you hear normally. But on the other hand, women that call guys that, what are they doing? Shaming them to go back to their family and stay in order. So you're right, man. Very good point.
It's just like the passport bros. They think that is a pathetic man.
Yes.
And what's really interesting about the grow up talk is that you never, in every instance that it is utilized against men, and I think it's actually been used against me more often by other men, to be honest. And there's a lot of men out there who are white knights who are looking out for
I was going to say they're typically simps,
right?
That use that term. It's women and simps. But sorry, continue, please.
But like every time it's been leveled against me, it's been a veiled attempt to do what is best for the woman in question.
Yeah.
Like no one ever pulled me aside and said, Orion, man, you really need to be true to yourself. And you need to spend the time to figure out what it is that makes you happy and to chase that with reckless abandon. You need to man up and do that. Or you need to man up and start that business that you've been talking about for 10 years. You need to man up and leave that woman because you clearly don't have that genuine burning desire for her anymore. She's not good for you, man. Man up and just end it. You never hear talk like that.
Yeah.
It's always put the ring on her.
Yeah.
Do the right thing. which is always do the right thing for the
her.
woman in question.
Yeah.
But they never say that to the women. They say do the right thing for you.
Yeah.
That's the biggest difference
It's-
whenever advice is dispensed to females versus men.
It's only selfish if it does benefit them. By the way, Twitch, come to YouTube and Rumble because we said too many times.